Hi everyone, and welcome to Bree Healthy. Today's guest is a super intelligent, powerful woman. She's a licensed psychologist who specializes in health and wellness, including obesity, weight management, and eating behaviors, among other topics. She's a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at NYU School of Medicine. She's been quoted in many health-related articles in major publications and is frequently featured on SiriusXM Doctor Radio. And she's also a friend of mine. Please welcome Dr. Rachel Goldman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited because this is the start of a series that we're putting together on emotional eating and other related topics that Rachel is an expert on. So I'm so excited to have you here and just to answer a lot of questions that a lot of you have been having. So let's get it started. How would you define emotional eating?
So emotional eating, I typically define as eating out of any emotion. So that can be out of sadness, out of being stressed, even bored. It can be also out of happy occasions and positive emotions as well. But there's a difference between physiological hunger and emotional hunger is out of that emotion.
Definitely. It's interesting that you say that we do eat when we're happy too. That's something that we don't always think about because most of the time we're focusing on it being emotional overeating is when I'm sad and I grab my pint of ice cream.
Exactly.
But that is true because a lot of people, they come to me and they say, like when I tell them, oh, like I just, I reserve my treats for certain times, and they say, well, when I lose this much weight, I want to have a big bowl of ice cream, but that's not, I always tell them not to use food as a reward.
Perfect, good. I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I never think about how that is a part of emotional eating too, even when we celebrate with food.
It is. I mean, I think in today's society and in the world that we grew up in, we typically automatically, go to cake at birthdays and cake at celebrations, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. So really when we're talking about emotional eating, we typically talk more about those negative emotions, but you're absolutely right that we tend to turn to food in many occasions, thanks to our society and the way that we were brought up anyways.
Yeah, because I remember when you get a good grade on a test when you're a kid, your mom takes you to go get ice cream or something. So I feel like we're almost kind of programmed to feel that food that is delicious is a reward.
Right. And then it makes it so much harder to break later when we've been brought up that way. But absolutely, you're right. I always say that we should not use food as a reward. And if somebody really wants ice cream, have ice cream, right? Don't save it for a special big occasion, because then when we feel restricted is actually then when we tend to overeat or binge later.
Definitely. I mean, ice cream is my favorite treat, so I definitely know what you mean by that. So when I think of emotional eating, I think about foods that are high in carbs, as well as sweets. Are these the types of foods that you notice certain clients frequently choosing?
Absolutely. So most people, when they have emotional eating and turn to food, it usually is a comfort food. So something like carbs or something that's sweet, that's usually what people say that they're craving. And there actually is evidence also with brain imaging studies that shows that people are more inclined to turning to those foods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that those foods over, per se, like protein gives you more dopamine? I know I've heard studies that it actually does sugar can release certain qualities in your brain similar to drugs, like certain drugs.
Right, exactly. So in some studies it does show there is some evidence that, for instance, in alcoholics, when they're looking at they're looking at images of alcohol, the same areas of the brain actually are activated similarly to people that are maybe overweight and look at images of high sweet or high carb foods. I actually did a research study looking at that a few years ago, and we found very similar evidence. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot more research that needs to be done in the area. I think in particular because the area that's being activated in the brain is actually the reward center. So when people see those types of foods, they're usually remembering positive experiences and having good memories, and that's a lot of the time where that's coming from as well.
That's so interesting. It's crazy that it's more than just what we desire, and it's really deeper on a chemical level.
Absolutely, yeah, which makes it difficult. But from a clinical perspective, we don't like to think of it that way, because then we think that we can't control it, that it's a deeper level that we have no control over. So clinically, we know that we can control this, and there's things that we can do to help us. It just may be challenging.
definitely. And I know that a lot of people are going through this, and it is overcomable. Absolutely 100%. I've helped people through it, and she's helped a million people through it. So if you do experience emotional overeating, just know that you are not alone and that there are ways to overcome it. So I'm wondering, what traits or behaviors have you seen that tend to lead to emotional eating, and what tends to trigger it?
So most of the time, it's an emotion. So maybe a stressful day at work, maybe feeling anxious, maybe, feeling sad, getting sad news. So usually any kind of stressor can lead to emotional eating or just like having a bad day type of thing. So what I usually hear most of the time is that people come home after work and they, participate in emotional eating after a stressful day. It's almost like people, talking about rewards, it's almost like people feel like, oh, I had such a stressful day, I reward myself, I deserve having something sweet. I think that's the way it starts, but actually habits are created from associations and then they become automatic behaviors. So maybe that association happened one day, right? Somebody had a stressful day at work, they came home, cookies were sitting out on the counter, they grabbed the cookie, and then all of a sudden it just became a normal routine for them, an automatic behavior. I come home and I want a cookie. So it's, so we have to break that association and break that habit.
Definitely, those good old after-work cookies.
Yeah.
It's funny because a lot of the time when I do, I try to not indulge too much during the week when I'm trying to, lose a couple pounds or whatever. For those that don't follow me too closely, sometimes I'll, gain a couple pounds back, lose them back. It happens.
That's normal.
Totally normal. So when I am back in the weight loss phase, I'll take a treat and I'll be like, you know what, I deserve this. But then I'm like, you know what, I cannot say that.
Right.
It's not about deserving food. It's about choosing to enjoy something and just letting yourself enjoy it without guilt.
Exactly.
It's not about deserving.
Right, yeah. And it's really just about if you really want it, and then coming to terms with the fact that you want it and accept it. Mm-hmm. So just today I was giving a talk about this actually, and I had said to people that it's the thought that follows the behavior that's actually more important than the behavior itself. So if you're eating a cookie, that's just a behavior. But if you're going to feel guilty about it afterwards, that guilt is going to start leading to a negative feeling and then lead to probably another negative behavior because you might feel guilty about it, then you might decide to skip your next meal or to overeat because you feel guilty. So really just being okay with it, asking yourself, do I really want this? Yes. Am I going to be okay with it afterwards? Yes. Then by all means, have your little treat, right? But if the answer is no and you're going to feel guilty about it, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. So would you consider guilt after a meal part of emotional eating? Because I've definitely experienced that a lot during my weight loss journey. I used to be very hard on myself. And I would go out to eat and be like, why did I do this? And I realized how unhealthy that is.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I guess it's not emotional overeating, but would that have anything to do with emotional eating in general?
Yeah, I think many people who participate either in emotional eating or overeating or binge eating do feel guilty afterwards. And I think, that's something to think about, that an emotional eating usually is either an automatic behavior that was built from that association, or it was like an impulsive act. So if we were to decide, I'm going to go to the frozen yogurt store today, I'm going to go get frozen yogurt, I'm probably not going to feel guilty about it because I made the conscious decision, I accepted it, I walked there, which gave me time to think about it, and then I had it. But if you have cookies or ice cream sitting out and you just grab it, it's almost like your brain isn't accepting it quite yet until afterwards. And then you're like, what did I just do? Now I feel guilty. So if you can go into the situation calm and thinking rationally, you're probably not going to feel guilty about it. You might be like, oh, I don't like should-haves, but you might say, oh, I shouldn't have had that. But you're probably not going to hold on to it like a real guilt. If you made the conscious decision. You made the decision, it's over and done with, move on.
Right, exactly. That's something that I know so many people struggle with. I struggle with it all the time. Even now, my relationship with food has improved a lot more, but still there's always those times when I feel like I slipped up and always just get right back on track after, but it's sometimes very challenging to not feel guilty
about
eating. But that's what we're working toward, and it's totally okay. We are all normal if you go through this too, and we are working together. Remember, we're going to be doing more videos, so if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, send me a message or an email, and we'll talk about them in our next video. So what are some steps that you would suggest to help someone overcome emotional eating?
It's a great question. So the first thing that I always recommend is to identify first what's going on. So there is a difference between emotional hunger and physiological hunger, or eating out of emotion and eating out of hunger. So the first step would be to identify that and differentiate the two. Usually I tell people the best way to figure that out is, for instance, if somebody comes home after work and you find yourself opening and closing cabinets or opening and closing the refrigerator, the light bulb should go off that that's a sign. Meaning, if you just open the refrigerator and you see a bowl of apples and you eat the apple, you are physiologically hungry. If you're opening and closing, you're looking for something very specific, probably that carb or that sweet, and nothing is going to satisfy that craving until you find that one specific thing, which you may not even know what it is, but the opening and closing is a sign that what's going on. So I usually tell people in that situation, if you can just take a minute and say stop and take a mini time out and ask yourself what's going on. Be like, why am I in the kitchen? Did I have a stressful day? What happened today? What's going on? Usually then people can identify some kind of trigger, some kind of emotion. And once you identify that it was that emotional hunger and not the physiological, then the best thing you can do is to do some other activity for about 10 minutes to distract your mind. That activity can be anything other than eating, smoking, drugs, or drinking alcohol. Anything else it can be, and within about 10 minutes of distracting yourself, usually it passed. That craving passed, that emotion passed, and you forgot about it, you're on to the next thing.
That's a great tip, because it's so important to be able to distract ourselves when we are hungry out of boredom. Like, not actually hungry, but there's so many times, I mean, my husband does it all the time, and I'm sure I do too, and just subconsciously, you don't realize it, but you'll be going into the fridge and just looking.
Exactly.
It's like, what am I even looking for? Like,
yeah.
Why am I taking so long to decide? If I was actually hungry, I would go pick the healthy snack, like grab a yogurt or something. But there's some days you're just like, no, like I really want that sweet. Like right now, I have some like cookies in the house. You know, those Girl Scouts that come around, and had to pick up mine, and so I have to make sure that like I put them in the closet so I don't see them. Yeah. And especially in a place where like I wouldn't just, you know, open and look around.
And that's a great tip. I actually tell people all the time to put the healthy food in the front of the refrigerator, the healthy food in the front of the cabinets. So when you do find yourself opening, that'll also help you, because it'll give you that time. You're like, oh, there's a bowl of fruit. I don't want it. Ding dong, you're probably not physiologically hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great tip to go. So what are some of the activities you would suggest to like go take a walk or something? Yeah. Or?
So that's also a great question that I get asked all the time. And my answer is always, I can't really tell you specifically what to do, because if I told you what worked for me, it may not work for you. But most of the time, the answers that I get that are really the best, although there's not a right or wrong, once again, unless it's eating alcohol, drugs, or smoking. Those are the only wrong answers. Anything else, so it can be taking a walk to get fresh air, which is also great because you're removing yourself from the kitchen. So avoiding and escaping the kitchen is a good idea. So getting fresh air, taking a walk, taking some deep breaths, exercise, of course, is fabulous for many reasons. Some people prefer to take a bath. Some people love cleaning the house. You know, that distracts them. I've literally had a client tell me that they clean the toilet because then they're not hungry anymore. But it can be listening to music. It can be calling a friend or calling social support, you know, somebody that in your network. So what I always recommend is that everybody come up with 3 good coping mechanisms. So the reason I say 3 is because you might say that you're going to take a walk and it's snowing and raining outside. You might say you're going to call your mother or a friend and your mom or your friend's not available. So to have 3 kind of go-to behaviors that you can turn to in those situations. One maybe in, you know, wherever you are. Also, some people participate in emotional eating when they're at work, right? There might be candy laying out or a kitchen full of snacks. So having an option to also participate in some kind of healthy coping mechanism when you're at work, where maybe you can't go outside and take a walk. So maybe in that situation, you would escape to the bathroom and just take some deep breathing to kind of bring yourself back together and, you know, take that moment.
That's all incredible tips, especially because a lot of the time we don't think that there are ways to distract ourselves from that. A lot of times we feel like this is what we are meant to be doing in this moment. Right. We need to be eating this snack. It's going to be the only thing that makes us feel better.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is realizing that it's not going to make you feel better.
Right.
If anything, it'll satisfy you for a few seconds and then it's gone and
you
you're
feel
like,
worse later.
Yeah, and then you just want more, and it's just a never-ending cycle of insatisfaction, if that's the right word.
And usually I tell people just to take a mini time out in that situation. So if we think about kids when they're emotional, they act out. So adults that participate in emotional eating, the eating is that impulsive act. We're acting out. Well, when kids act out, they go in a timeout, right? To calm down, to relax, to kind of think about what they did and then to take the next steps. Mm-hmm. Well, we as adults also need to take a timeout. I call it a mini adult timeout. So when you're realizing what you're doing and opening those cabinets, just kind of take a step back, take a deep breath, and ask yourself what's going on, what's a better solution. And if another good tip is if you can remember how you felt after the last time you maybe ate the ice cream or ate the cookie out of an emotion, that feeling should also help stop you. So a lot of people, you know, once again, you might feel guilty, you might have a belly ache. So if you can remember that, that'll also help you stop doing it. But you have to take that time out because impulsively we grab and then it's too late.
Right. That's so important to remember because there are nights when I really do overeat, and I just, like, on the weekend sometimes I'll usually allow myself to have, you know, one big meal and one treat dessert, and a lot of the time I do have more than that, and that's okay with me. But some days I really just go crazy on it, and then I do have a stomach ache, but then the next week I totally forget about that, and I just do it again and again, and it just doesn't make me feel good, and I'm so excited to get back to eating healthy again.
Right.
So that's a positive of it, but at the same time, I shouldn't have to go through that stomach ache and put my body through, through God knows what, because my body's not used to foods like that in the first place.
Right.
So it's very important for us to always listen to our bodies and to make sure that we're making the best choices for ourselves.
Exactly.
That's such great advice.
Yeah.
So, have you personally seen improvements in certain patients who've dealt with this, and have you witnessed people overcome this obstacle?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, I've been working in this field for almost 10 years now, and I've seen so many people. I would say the majority of my clients actually participate in emotional eating. And it's literally just taking these steps, and people can overcome it. Look, I mean, I think it's something important is to keep in mind that we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have slips. Mm-hmm. Not a big deal. They're going to happen, and we should accept that because I always say life happens. Exactly. But absolutely, if anybody is struggling or, you know, with emotional eating, it's something that we can overcome. But also keep in mind that it's been a habit. So that automatic behavior, that habit is not going to change overnight. So it does take time to build and recreate new habits, healthier habits. But you know, the two things that I always tell people is to be persistent and to be patient. So just because it didn't work today doesn't mean it's not going to work tomorrow. And to usually give yourself a good 2 weeks before you give up or before you be like, why does this not work? Because life happens and it's challenging. If it was easy, we wouldn't have obesity being a problem in this country. But obesity is a disease, and these are things that we have to work on.
Definitely, and that really resonates with me in so many ways, especially because I never knew that I could lose weight before I did it, and to see, not to toot my horn or anything, but
you should.
to see myself, looking back, to see the behaviors that totally flipped. I literally used to eat, and this is the correct form of literally, would just shovel food down my throat and not care because it made me feel happy.
Right.
Emotional eating.
Yeah.
But now, once I started my weight loss journey, it was a complete 180. So if anybody is going through this and they don't think it's possible, they just don't know if they really can, or they feel like it might be too hard, just know that, you will surprise yourself. You have no idea what you're capable of, and as long as you set your mind to something, you absolutely can achieve it. So I want to thank you so much, Rachel, for coming on here and talking to me. So we're going to be doing more videos on the topic of emotional eating. So please let us know if you have any questions that you want answered on the show. So go ahead and leave them in the comments, send me an email, write anywhere that I will see it, and we will absolutely make sure that we get to them. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a beautiful day.